I want to offer a warm welcome to everyone and thank you so much for joining us today, especially on a Friday, or rather a Friday, because I know we're all so busy. Thank you so much to the panelists and to all the students, staff, and faculty who are able to join us to learn a little bit more about the process of submitting grants. We're not going to go over every single component because it's a multifaceted, multi-layered process that is tailored according to what RFP you're addressing. Today, we just want to play to the strengths of our SOE faculty and tailor our questions so that they can elaborate a little bit on their expertise and their past experiences in applying to grants. So you might have a bunch of questions that develop as you listen to people about grants. And you can actually hold on to those questions if we don't get around to them, because we're thinking we might do a series. So you'll have other opportunities to learn additional information about grants. So,
yeah.
So we have some people who might not already have the chance to mute. If you are joining us today, if you wouldn't mind muting, that would be awesome so that we can have really good acoustics. I didn't introduce myself if there's anyone I haven't met yet. My name is Jen Katzbone and Contro, and I'm the Associate Dean of Research in the School of Education. And we are going to hand it over to Dr. Sheila Vaidya, who's a professor, and she's just going to introduce the concept behind the panel, and then she's going to kick things off. So Sheila, may I hand it over to you?
Thank you. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, and welcome to everybody, all the panelists. I wanted to share that this event, I cannot start this process without thinking of Penny, of our dean, Dr. Penny Hamrick, who actually talked about this with me in the beginning of the last actually at the end of the last academic year in April or June, when I was discussing with her about receiving a grant. She suggested that I do something to the effect of working on writing a proposal. And this is what we had discussed at the time. And since that time, Jen had been working with her about developing this work of, and also including a panel about grant writing. And so I say this in honor of Dr. Penny Hamrick, who is a part of this process and was the person who kind of initiated this idea and the work that is entailed here. So what I'd like to do first is introduce the panelists who will be talking later, and we'll be responding to panel questions. So the panelists are Dr. Arutus Foster. He's a professor of learning technologies in the School of Education, and he's also the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Graduate Studies and the founder of the Learning Games Network. He has won awards for his work on technology and learning. He's a Phi Beta mentor, a Phi Beta Kappa mentor, a Mellon Mays Fellow, the recipient of a Spencer Research Training Grant, and a NSF Career Award. Dr. Tony May is an associate professor in the School of Education in educational leadership and management and teaching and learning curriculum. Her research interests include assessment development and use, program and grant evaluation, about which she's going to address questions today. And she is also works with evaluation of STEM education and urban education. She's also the co-director of the Methods Lab in the School of Education. Dr. Chris Wright, Dr. Christopher Wright, is an associate professor of STEM education in the Department of Teaching, Learning, and Curriculum at Drexel University. He's also the co-founder and director of the Informal Learning Linking Engineering, Science, and Technology. And this is a lab, the ILIST lab. He's the recipient of the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers. He has, for scientists and engineers, excellence in science education research, and he's also the recipient of the Faculty Early Career Development Program for research. So we will be, you've heard about from Dr. Jen Katz, and my name is Sheila Vaidya. I'm a professor in the School of Education, and since 2004, I have consistently had several NSF grants with co-PIs or a PI myself, and I have consistently had these grants, so I know a thing or two about writing a grant, which I can share with all of you, with the people who are attending. So I can share a few tips and ideas that I have learned over the years, and these are having to do with preparation. So I would say the first thing is that the preparation of the concept is the preparation of a grant concept. When you start writing a grant, the preparation and the conceptualization of the concept. So how you go from the concept to the proposal. It entails extensive background work, and it entails situating the need for your work in a discipline, in a discipline, or addressing the needs of the country. So so I'm part of a group that is dedicated to the mission of placing teachers, outstanding teachers, in high need schools. And when we look at the impact that each teacher makes in the classroom, when we study the impact that each teacher makes, and we think about the impact that one teacher could make in 10 years, it's very powerful, and it's very, very, it becomes a mission to be able to do that and to address issues of social justice and good teaching in urban schools. So I'm part of a group that is with Bryn Mawr College and University of Pennsylvania and Temple University and LaSalle. We all work on this issue together, and we are a group that's called Philadelphia Regional Noise Programs, which has another acronym now, which I will not go into how it changed the acronyms. But the idea is to be able to write a proposal with significant extensive study of the background work. And also, I would say that unless you have passion and interest, you're not going to be able to engage in the extensive work that is involved. So the knowledge of the problem to be addressed, previous research, your personal observations, all these formulate what is a deep knowledge of the need. And it's an interest just to be able to make a difference. That's what drives the passion for writing this, for writing a proposal, because it is significant work. It's very, very time consuming and extensive work, as we all know, those of us who have written a proposal. And so it entails a lot of passion that you want to make a difference, and that's what drives the project. So unless one is actually embedded in the problem and you feel a part of the issues of solving an issue or solving certain things, you don't get driven to do this. So if your previous work has shown some impact, like I would say, I talk about this one teacher impacting lives in so many years, it's important to convey that in the proposal. So it shows that you know the impact of your work, and discuss this in your proposal if you have done this before, or you see the impact from other people's proposals, or see an impact that is making a difference. Then the next point I would make is be sure to follow the instructions for the grant application. For example, details are very important, and you have to be succinct because you have to do this in 15 pages. So the language precision is very, very important. And it's very important that, for example, I work with the NSF, and they do not like language that is elusive or rambling. So it has to be very precise. And I would say that you need to be succinct because you need to say more in as few words as possible. So this is where you work on the purpose, the goals, objectives, work plan, evaluation about which you'll be hearing more, and disseminations. If these are important things to discuss as much as you can in the grant in ways that are succinct, and then make sure that the detailed plan includes things like the how at each step. And so this is where the how entails collecting data at each step, and where you have to say things like who is collecting data, for whom, why, and the NSF wants to know every little step, as in the 15 pages, every little thing that you'll be doing and engaging in as much depth as you can, and to be able to understand it clearly, because there are so many questions that people have that they want to be answered. So it's important also to discuss the needs that are identified by the request for proposal, which by the way, I forgot to mention that you should read it more than once, the request for proposal, so you actually get a sense of what they are looking for, what the program is looking for, what are their needs, and what is the program looking for. So you actually think about the needs that are identified and how they're addressed by the proposal. So the proposal has to meet the needs that are identified. And if you think that you might be having any issues or any problems that you might encounter, you should acknowledge these issues and be aware and provide awareness of these problems and some ways to resolve. Because if you don't, then somebody else will point out these things to you. What is important to convey is the significance and the impact of the proposed research. We are actually looking into the future. It's like the whole process is really looking into the future and the vision of the future impact. So writing a proposal, I find that is a lot of, thinking into the future. And it's important to think into the future because other people will pick up your work and use that to advance in the knowledge in the field, or to advance the needs of the country, like what we are doing. Our proposal is doing to making an impact in the urban schools, and we're doing it as a group, but we're each doing our own work. And so that is a significant impact that drives you. But actually this is the vision where you're looking into the future, and it's important to convey that. It's important to convey your dreams and your goals and your vision in a clear way. And finally, I would say that do not submit an application that has not been critiqued by a colleague. it's very important to share, because when we are engaged in the process of writing very deeply, it's important that somebody else looks at it from another eye, another avenue, another a point of view, and they're able to critique it and think more clearly than we are, because we are embedded in the process. So I would also always give it to somebody who knows the area, who knows the field, and who can critique it. And those are the things that are the highlights of what I have learned. And as for me, as well as the panelists, please feel free to email us from any, we would welcome an email from anyone who has any questions or any consultation on a proposal. And the panelists themselves have said that they would welcome emails, and because of the limited time that we have today. So with that point, I would start with the panel, with that discussion. I would start with the panel and with the panel questions. So we'll start first with Dr. Arutus Foster, so Dr. Foster, you have worked on several NSF research panels that evaluate grants. So you worked on several panels at National Science Foundation that evaluate grants. And it would be great to hear about the lessons that you've learned in the process of doing this, and to share your panel review experiences. Are you here, Dr. Foster?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay, great.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I go, I just want to let everyone know that I'm leaving at 12:30 to go to a parent-teachers conference with my daughter. So I believe Jen and Sheila and the rest of the team will make our emails available, and you can ask any question, and I will most definitely respond. Yes, I have. I've reviewed mostly for NSF. I've reviewed for EDUCAUSE, Department of Ed, ONR, Office of Naval Research, quite a few of them, but today I will talk mostly about my experiences as a NSF panel reviewer. And just a little bit about NSF, so you know, because that's mostly where we apply to in terms of grants in education. A few people may apply for Department of Ed as well. A lot of these organizations use a similar, federal agencies use a similar sort of review protocols. So NSF, especially for grad students here and for junior faculty, NSF is divided into 7 directorates. And you can check with NSF website. These directorates are all listed there, ranging from biological sciences, CIS, computer information systems engineering, CISE. The ones that really pertain and for us a lot of the times are social and behavioral economic sciences, and education and human resources, EHR. There's also the Director for Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships, which is kind of outside one of those 7. But importantly, for me, I have reviewed for social behavioral sciences and EHR, as well as CISE, the computer one. And I've been reviewing for NSF at least 2 panels, because I've done more than 2 in several years since 2012. I'm at least 2 panels. I've reviewed quite widely for ECR, ASIL, the career, CISE, intelligence, information intelligence system, ITEST, DRK-12. I've reviewed for a lot of these. And for myself personally, I've submitted 26 proposals to NSF, and I've been funded 12 times. So, and just so you know that for the NSF, so I think I'm batting above average basically when it comes on to my own. So I've learned lessons in terms of the review process at NSF, in terms of what reviewers look for. And based on what reviewers look for, it kind of gives me a helping hand in terms of what I should put in my NSF awards. The one thing I should tell folks of junior faculty here, if you have not done an NSF review panel, you should. Chris Wright is here, and he's done NSF as well as Tony, and they're here, and I'm sure they can provide insights in terms of access to how you do this. And Jen has invited program officers to campus before, so and they'll go anywhere as long as they're invited. So that's a great way to become a panel reviewer, and that's the best way to learn about what's expected in grants. Just so you know, for every single grant that's submitted to NSF, NSF looks for two main things: intellectual merit and broader impacts. That's the criteria for which every grant is reviewed. And some grants have special criterions that also need to be met in terms of the review process. But even for those special criterion, and the merit review process still requires that each and everyone still adheres to intellectual merit and broader impact. And what do I mean by intellectual merit? For NSF, the intellectual merit criterion is about the potential to advance knowledge. In terms of how does the grant helps in terms of building and current literature and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the broader impacts, income, the potential benefit to society, the social milieu, meaning, you could think of that in terms of writing, what's the transfer impact of this? How is this going to benefit people in society? And the intellectual merit in terms of how does this advance our academic knowledge and so forth, and power and so forth. If we think of it that way. And of course, within these, they look at the extent to which the proposed activities have been explored. NSF love projects that are high risk, high payoff. And in particular, NSF program officers love to look for grants, that are supporting high risk innovations. Generally speaking, if your project is just not innovative in a sense of being high risk, a lot of times it does not provide a lot of the funding that you'll be seeking for, especially for the big dollar ones. And if you have not been funded from NSF before, I recommend that you email a program director or assistant director or program officer and try to talk to them about their NSF Eager Awards. NSF Eager Awards cuts across all directorates, and those supports an idea that you may have, but this idea is something that's outside the scope of the current funding mechanisms or the current RFPs that NSF may have. You email them, set up a time. If you're here in Philadelphia, take a trip to NSF. I highly recommend it. Go there, get to know the program officers and directors there, and talk to them about your idea. And oftentimes, if the idea is high risk, potential high risk and potential high payoff, they'll often invite you to submit an Eager Award. That's how I got my first award, was an NSF Eager Award on ideas that I had that was, exploratory ideas that were outside the realm of the current award mechanism that they have. So I recommend that as well in terms of getting in. But keep in mind that NSF program officers make recommendations to fund or decline a proposal. They don't control the monies within grants. The recommendation fund, but they generally have a lot of power, more power than, say, someone at the Department of Head as a program officer, because NSF program officers, if they like something, they can shepherd it if it has received the rankings, and the rankings that you generally get from reviewers from the beginning, usually to tell it if it's poor or fair or good or very good, and those are the general criteria that reviewers look for initially. If you tend to get poor and fair, you're not going to get funded. Sometimes if you get good and fair, you're not going to be funded. Generally speaking, you want to get the very goods, because remember, a panel usually has 6 to 7 members that make it up. Each of these people have different expertise, taking different lens. And as Sheila referred to, you don't want to have too much esoteric language or jargons in your proposal. And so when they're reading this, they're going to look for, how does this benefit, or does it advance knowledge, and how does it benefit society, or does it meet the merit criteria for this specific award? Is it one that will where the team, the review, the team that submitted the award, is there sufficient expertise on the team? And expertise is looked at in several different ways. Look at based on what's in your CV. You look at your publications, and the publication is generally what determines someone's expertise. not what you say you are, but what's in your publication. That's a general how they look for what's your expertise areas. And they look at that for the entire team. They also look at the experience of the PI, the person leading the project. And that matters in terms of the amount of money, because generally speaking, if a young PI is applying for grants that are $2-3 million and doesn't have a lot of experience, they might say, does the person have the knowledge and the skills to execute in this? And so it needs to be clear in your proposal in terms of who will manage what in the proposal. If you're a young PI, you want to have some senior colleagues as co-PI, because they may say, okay, the person is young, but the co-PIs there are people who are skilled and experienced who can help the young PI. And so these are things that are considered in the review process as well. But the ideas are number one. If your idea is good, generally speaking, you will get funded. And the NSF program officer will work with you if you're a young PI just to make sure that you add certain, they might say, we like this project, we like this idea, but we feel like we don't know if you can shepherd this. Would you mind adding one more person to your team? They will do that. They'll work with you. They just won't, if your idea is good, they're not going to just say, we're not going to fund you if it's a pretty good idea. And most proposals that are funded, so after you get those scores of good and very good and above, and you goes to NSF, then the program officers and the team meet. There's another criterion that's look at where they look at if is it excellent, is it not not excellent in terms of in terms of is this competitive? Is it highly competitive or not competitive? Those are three criteria: not competitive, competitive, and highly competitive. And it's ranked those way. And generally speaking, the ones that get funded are the ones that are highly competitive. At that point, the very good and excellent, those goes out the window, because it's looked at by the panel right there, and is whether it's highly competitive or competitive. Obviously, not competitive won't get funded. Competitive, you'll get good reviews, and they'll give you feedback in terms of be able to revise and resubmit. And highly competitive, unless they're no highly competitive, then some of the competitive one goes in the pool, and then they might get funded. But if it's a highly competitive, generally speaking, competitive ones don't get funded, and those are done shepherd up to program directors, and then it goes on to the business side of NSF, where they might contact the program, the PI, and say, hey, we like your idea, get your IRB ready, because NSF will not fund you if you don't have IRB ready to go forward if it's IRB related project. Drexel will work with you and get that done quickly, usually in 24, 48 hours. You'll have your IRB, in terms of to go out if you're funded, and you let them know that this is quickly, this is needed urgently. And after that, basically, NSF, from the moment you submit your grant, obviously 6 months before you hear back from them. After you hear from, after 6 months, if you hear from them, probably another 90 days if it's funded. From the time you hear from them till the time you're funded, another 90 days or so forth. So you could think of that as 90 days, another 3 months, so up to 9 months before you have your money in hand to do your project. Basically, could be as much as that. I know in the case of my career, that was during one of those shutdowns where the government was shut down because politics and there was no money to fund things. I think I submitted mine in 2013. I started mine back in 2014, but I remember it was up until even that July, the following July, I was, before the money was released and all sort of stuff because of the politics involved in the country in terms of government shutdown. But NSF program officers are there to work with you, and they'll work with you to get your thing funded. Principal investigators submit an average 2.3 proposals for every award they receive. So if you think of that, for every 2.3 you submit, you're getting funded, you're batting well with NSF in terms of being funded. And general to NSF, you submit through either Fastlane, research.gov, or grants.gov. And now, more recently, they're transitioning a lot of awards from Fastlane to research.gov, but most are still submitted through Fastlane. Anyone has questions? Jen, Sheila, I can ask, they can ask questions. I don't know if you want to ask 2 questions, but I have to go very quickly.
I think we will stop at this point because we're reaching our time limit, right, Jen? So I think thank you so much, Arutus. That was very helpful and enlightening. And Jen, I'll move to you for the other questions.
All right, thank you. And thanks so much, Arutus. And what we'll do is if someone wants to post a question in the chat, I will save the chat and I'll pull them and then I will connect those people like to
That's
Arutus.
great. That's a
Yeah.
great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you so much. So for the sake of time, we're just going to move on. And Chris, we're going to move over to Chris. And what I want to engage Chris in a conversation with is his approach to collaboration. So because many grants involve collaboration within a college, across different colleges, and specifically with community research partners or schools, Chris, I just wanted you to tell us a little bit about your approach to collaboration on grants and then your researcher identity and positionality vis-a-vis new partners that you engage with.
So first off, good afternoon and thanks for having me today. So in response to your question, I do think it's very important to consider and think about your positionality within the proposal and the project. And that's something that I always try to center as I even come up with research ideas in the projects to submit, right? And so specifically, my research has been situated within STEM education, in particular, relationships with marginalized communities, right? And so I always try to center this when thinking about my role. So one motto that I tend to stick by is that I am conducting research with communities as opposed to conducting research on communities. And so I do think that that is a particular way in which I approach, what does it mean to be a collaborator, especially with the people I'm working with in that regards. And how that tends to come out is that we tend, or I'm doing research within an education.
Eric, do you hear Chris?
Looks like we have a little momentary glitch, so I do not hear him at this minute. Let's give it a second and see if he picks back up. Hopefully.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for being patient and bearing with us a little bit, everyone. I think he's reconnecting right now. It looks like because he went out and then, yeah.
Exactly.
Let's see. So I don't see him here right now. Tony, would you mind if we pivoted to you and then we'll close out with Chris? We'll swap you.
Sure. I do have slides, so if you guys can take these ones down and I can share mine, that'd be appreciated.
Right, exactly. So what we're going to do is we'll wait for Chris to come back on, but we'll let Tony fully explain what she has prepared today. And if I can just do a brief preamble, Tony had volunteered to talk on the topic of evaluation. And so she actually would like to share an example of, let's see, I think that you were going to share an example of perhaps a timeline or an evaluation chart. I can let you explain, but.
Yeah, so it was my understanding I was asked to come and share a little bit about evaluation and evaluation planning. as
Yeah.
well as timelines. And so I have some samples, but also those of you who know me, I am a talker. And so it is better for me if I have some points to share with you so that I can stay succinct and to our timeline that we've been given. So I'm going to share. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to first start off by talking about evaluation plans. And let me see if I can. So I have two monitors up, which is not always the easiest. So let's see. All right. So from my perspective and the work I've done a lot of evaluation work. I generally see two different types of projects for grants. The first kind is a training or a program implementation grant. And this is typically somebody has this great idea of how we can deliver some kind of program to some particular group of individuals, and we can train them, and we want to see these changed outcomes based on our program. And when we have a program like that, typically an external evaluator is required. And that external evaluator is external to the implementation team. So it could still be from the same home unit. And what I mean by that is someone in the School of Education could come up with a program that they'd like to implement to pre-service teachers because they think it's going to help them in some way. And in doing that, the external evaluator could still be from the School of Education. They just simply cannot be on that implementation team. And that is common for most grants unless they explicitly state that it cannot be. A program like this it may not have research questions, but it will absolutely need evaluation questions. And that just kind of depends on who the solicitor is for this. My work is not exclusive with NSF. So depending on who the funder is, you may not actually need research questions, but you would need evaluation questions in a project like this. For a research and development grant, these are different in the sense that somebody may be trying to develop a tool or develop a resource, and it's not as much about what I can do for a particular group in terms of training. Instead, it's how does my tool work, or can I get funding to develop this or to just do research? In this case, an external evaluator may not actually be required. Instead, you can use the PI team for research to look at the research outcomes, and you would instead possibly have an advisory board to do a process evaluation. I oftentimes have people come to me and say, I want to do this project. Would you be my external evaluator? And I read through their call for proposals. As Sheila described, you really need to read it carefully. And I look at them and I'm oftentimes find myself in a project like this saying, you don't actually need me to do an external evaluation. Instead, get an advisory board panel together to evaluate the process that you go through. And it usually works out nicely that way. A project like this is likely going to require research questions. It may require evaluation questions if there's an actual evaluation done rather than an advisory board panel. So similar to what Sheila already said, when it comes to evaluation planning, it's really important to read that solicitation or that RFP. RFP means request for proposals. So you need to read it very carefully. It gives you a lot of good information about your evaluation. Oh, I'm clicking a button and I don't see anything happening. Do you see it moving? Oh, there we go. It's going to tell you if you need an external evaluation. It will explicitly say if you do need one, or it may not say that you do. You could have an internal evaluation, and that solicitation will identify that information to you. It will tell you if you can have an advisory board and what their role might look like in terms of evaluation. It's going to tell you if you need a summative and or a formative evaluation. It also will tell you about the scope of the evaluation and the methods. Some solicitations I've seen explicitly say they want quantitative and qualitative information pulled for these. They want to see a mixed methods evaluation, or they'll say, we want these outcomes addressed specifically. It will also tell you about budgeting in some cases. Some of them very carefully say you must give 10% to an external evaluator. Others don't tell you any of that. They say you can do whatever you see as fit, but you do often get information from these. In terms of evaluation plan writing, developing a logic model is very important. What does a logic model mean? This is an example of a very, very simple logic model. This logic model is in a project that is funded from NSF. It's a project called DeepCat, where we are developing assessments of problem solving in a computer adaptive testing environment. Like I said, I'm saying this is a simple example because some projects require outcomes to be short-term, intermediate, and long-term. In this one, we just said we have an overarching outcome. But what you can see from this simple plan is we have our inputs, which are we need NSF support to do these things here. We also have collaborators. These are the things we're putting into our project. We then have a group of activities that are going to be done in this project. Those activities lead to the following outputs. And then we have this ultimate outcome. So the next two tips go hand in hand. Is an evaluation plan needs to be objectives driven. That means that you have to have very clear objectives for your evaluation, or for your project, I'm sorry, that you're doing. And those objectives then drive the evaluation plan, and alignment is critical. And alignment means everything that you're doing has to be very clearly aligned. And I'm going to show you an example of this right here is an evaluation plan alignment table. And this particular project is a cybercore project out of College of Computing and Informatics that I'm doing an evaluation for. It's funded through NSF, and they have three main topics that they want to that they were discussing in their project. And each of these topics has a specific objective that they're trying to meet. Each of those objectives are aligned with data sources, and the data sources are then aligned with the analytical techniques. And you can see that there's different colors in this table here. And the reason is I like color because I like it to, I like things to represent themselves, and you can just look at them and see them. The top pieces up here, the recruitment and support and recruitment diversity, those are only evaluated in a summative form. But the bottom, validation theory, empirical evidence, these are all evaluated both formatively and summatively. And in the narrative around this table, each of these pieces in here have the same color when it speaks about them in the formative section. So it was just helping to show how the formative and the summative come together. So my last tip for an evaluation planning is to bring the evaluator in during the planning phase. If you get to the point where you're like, okay, now I have this great grant put together, I'm going to go see if I can get an evaluator. It's too late. You need to bring that evaluator in early. Let them know what you think you're doing and how you're doing it. And they need to have time to look over the call for proposals. They need to have time to talk to you about those objectives. They may have some good feedback in how to shape those objectives, because that's going to drive their work. I'm going to stop sharing now because that's my information on evaluation planning. If you want to, I don't know, Sheila, Jen, if you want to take time for questions, or if Chris is back and he wants to go into his part, and then I can do timeline after that.
Yes, welcome back, Chris. So I would say that you should continue where you left off.
Apologies, I'm not quite sure where I left off because it froze on me, so I'm not quite sure what
So
point
maybe
it
Jen will
froze.
ask the question again.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you were getting into a great discussion about actually the use of the word collaborating with community partners, not collaborating like on, or like you had made a distinction between the words that you used, which indicated your positionality.
Okay, thank you. Yes, again, apologies about that. So within this work, again, we're within an education space. And so our quote unquote research subjects are human beings, they're people, right? And so as I said, I try to keep that part centered in how I develop an actual proposal and what does it mean to work with collaborators from that standpoint. There are different ways in which you can communicate that idea through a proposal. Number one is through the design of your research. So at what point do you bring in a collaborator to think about your idea? And so I try very hard to bring in potential people to work with early on in the process so we can collectively develop research questions, the ways in which we will collect data and or analyze data. So it's again giving them some agency in how we think about that. And then additionally, NSF does look very close at the budget, right? And so if 90% of your budget is going to the university folks that you're working with, but only 10% or 5% is going to the teachers and or students and or your collaborators, that does not look favorably within the eyes of the NSF panel, right? So they see that as you taking advantage of that partnership. And so think very much about how you decide where certain resources and also certain funds should go within your project. So for me, again, I try to think about, well, if I'm working with someone, what are going to be their needs? And if it's a school, if it's a community center, the other thing is you want to, when at the end of your project, you want to think about how do you leave that location in a different place, or how do you positively impact that actual location, those people, in ways in which before you even came. And so I try to keep all of those things into consideration as I'm putting together a proposal and also thinking about a collaborator. The last piece is thinking about additional researchers that you should take up. And again, that's a long conversation that you should engage with other people about. I would hesitate to jump into a partnership, quote unquote, with people that you don't necessarily haven't had the chance to really flesh out your ideas, your dispositions, your ways of thinking. Because to me, it's easier to have those conversations at the beginning of a project, but then when you get later on and into a project, when there's money involved between different institutions, different departments, different colleges, it can be a bit more difficult to navigate, right? And so I do have the conversations about the positionality of myself and my co-researchers prior to putting in any proposal itself. Again, I would highly recommend that you have those talks and discussions prior to share and then try to hash out those details. One last point and one fine point is when I am working with other institutions, and you might hear more about this from our fantastic grants person, Tammy, is that I try to think about a collaborative proposal. So NSF has these things called collaborative proposals, whereas although there's one lead, so let's say Drexel is the lead, if you're working with Temple, if they put in a collaborative proposal, Temple gets their own pot of money and Drexel gets their own pot of money, right? And so from that standpoint, there's no need for us to go to either institution to try to get funds when we need funds. And in the same vein, the PI from Drexel is considered a PI, and the PI from Temple is also considered a PI as opposed to co-PIs. Some places that makes a big difference. And so just keeping those things in mind as you decide and determine how you're going to put a proposal together from a collaboration standpoint are, I think, important things to think about. So with that, like I said, I'll end there. There's a lot more that could be said, but however, for the sake of time, I'll stop and see if there's any questions.
Well, Chris, may I ask one further elaboration point about collaboration?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was kind of thinking we have a lot of students who work in schools as well as faculty, but the students are probably interested in how do you partner with schools maybe you're reaching out for the first time and you don't have that deep history of that partnership. Do you have any tips that you could share with us?
Yes. So that can be tricky. And if you know, so if you have thoughts about how you might want to approach it, that you might want to work with a particular place, what I have done in the past is that I have, gone to a school, gone to a community center, and I've chosen to volunteer for maybe 6 months, maybe several months, as a way for me just to get acclimated to the actual context and for them to get a chance to know me, and then vice versa. And so in that way, I'm building a relationship with, again, that school, with that community, prior to me coming in and saying, hey, I want to do research, with you. After that volunteering space and or time is when now the introduction of a research project is a bit more viable, because again, they know who I am, I know who they are, and we work together from that standpoint. And so I found that to be a very good way. Some of the graduate students that I'm working with here at Drexel, I give them the same advice. We're trying to figure out now where would you like to volunteer your time at in the beginning, so that you can develop that relationship when thinking about your research going forward. And so that's what I have done. And that's been, for me, the best approach that I've been able to take in thinking about, again, conducting research with individuals as opposed to on. And so, yeah.
So I think if we have time, I would like to have Tony go back to the timeline.
Yeah, perfect. Tony, do we still have you? Yep, I see you there.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm working on it. Sorry.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Chris, for those tips. I think those are both really valuable. And of course, there's lots of different kinds of approaches, but those are like really good starter tips. I appreciate that.
All right. Sorry, I'm just trying to find my. Okay. Screen. Oops. Okay, I think I got it. Do you see project timeline? All right. So Sheila made a comment at the very beginning that a project funder really wants to, they want to know every step and understand clearly your detailed plan for your proposal. And I believe very firmly that a good timeline can actually graphically represent this for the people reviewing. So the importance of timelines. I would say the importance of timelines is that these first 5 pieces here, this all to me is in terms of planning. You are able to give the details of the project activities in your timeline. It shows when each piece is going to actually occur. It indicates the responsible partners. As Chris talked about partnerships, you're going to have a lot of different people working on your grant, and it tells who is responsible for getting each piece of this puzzle done. It expresses feasibility of the project. If you have a solid timeline, it shows that you know what you're doing and that you can do it and that you have strength to do it. It also can justify your budget. I'll explain that when I actually show you an example of a timeline and what I mean by it can justify the budget, but it shows who's working and when and why they should get money or why they should get course releases at that time. It's also, once you get your grant, this timeline really is the guide to conducting your project. It shows you how to implement that project. And I can't tell you how many times I'm on a grant and people are saying, well, shouldn't we be doing this? And we're saying, hey, let's pull up that timeline and let's take a look. Where are we supposed to be right now? What should we be doing? And we're like, hey, we're only in year 2. We don't do that until year 3. So this really helps you to structure what you're doing and who's doing it. So I'm going to show you one example of a timeline, and timelines can be done in lots of different ways, but here is an example of a timeline. This is from a grant that is currently funded. It is a 5-year grant. And as you can see, I like the color because I like it to link to things and people can just see that. What we did underneath the figure was we put a note section because we're talking about each year of the project in terms of fall, winter, spring, and summer. So we say explicitly, what does summer mean? What does fall mean to us? We also then, if you look in the left-hand column, it shows the activities timeline. What we did for this timeline was this project was built in phases. There are 7 phases, and that's our theoretical framework for implementing this project. And we put each of those phases into our timeline, and then we put the specific activities under each phase that was going to take place. And then we very clearly detailed when those things would take place and the color links to who is doing them. So we have content experts. I'm going to pick on them because they're green and they're at the top here. If you look at my content experts in year 1, those content experts are working all of year 1 across all of those terms. That means that they could take funding or course releases in any of those terms, and it would make sense in my budget justification. Whereas if you look at the green space in my year 5, they are doing some work in the fall, and they are doing some work in the spring, and they have some summer work, but they don't have much going on in the winter. You can also see their work really starts to die down in year 5. So if my content expert people weren't able to get course releases in a winter term of this particular project. So this detailed level of a timeline really helps you to show, you know what you're doing and who's doing it and who's doing it when. I'm going to stop my share there. I hope I stopped my share. And just to throw out there, I know that everyone on this panel has done lots of great grant work. So you should, feel comfortable asking people for examples of things. If you are writing a proposal and somebody says you need to have a logic model and you don't know what that is, make sure that you're asking other people for examples.
Yeah, great. This
is wonderful.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's great. I think Jen, I think we're pretty much out of time. I just wondered if Dr. Chris Wright would have anything else that you wanted to say and didn't have time.
No, I just hope that this was helpful. And again, if there were any specific questions that someone would have, I'm welcome to answer and address anything through email. So please feel welcome
so we'll
to
see
do
in
so.
the chat. And as Jen said, that we'll send the questions to you if anyone asks the questions. So I would say that I just want to thank all the panelists for participation and for cooperating in this endeavor that we've been trying to do for a long time, Jen and I. And I want to thank Dr. Arutus Foster, Dr. Chris Wright, and Dr. Tony May. And I think the next thing is the budget, right, Jen?
Yeah, thank you so much. And so, Tammy, if you'll excuse me for 1 minute, I just want to show, you said you had a couple extra minutes. I just want to show people our website and then introduce you, if that's all right.
Great.
All right, wonderful. So I just want to show a new feature on our research website in the School of Education. Sorry, will you unshare for 1 second?
Sure.
Then I will share.
Sorry
All
about that.
Yeah, perfect. No problem. So I just want to provide this information to orient people, especially if you're a student. We added something new in the spring, and then we're updating it so that it's more obvious and a little bit more clear to you, in addition to the emails that we send around each month for grant opportunities. What we do is we try to house them here. So the next part, we're transitioning from our panel to our mini workshop, where we're going to have Tammy Della Fave talk about the process of constructing a good grant budget and get her tips and tricks. And then we're going to go to Damien Rohrbacher, who is going to talk about Funding Institutional. Funding Institutional is a resource that we list right here. This is the first one that I'm highlighting that should show on the screen. And then the third component of the mini workshop is we'll transition to our Office of Foundations Director, Megan Loeb. And she's going to talk about working with foundations, which is a little separate than the federal agency talk that we've had on the panel in terms of working with NSF. So we have there's a different process. And then we'll conclude at 2. And there are several one-on-one sessions for faculty to meet with Megan and talk about their research. So in terms of the School of Education Office of Research, what I do is I work with Tammy Delafave a lot in terms of helping to support faculty. And so she's really key on assisting with preparing a budget and making sure that we comply with the different criteria of that particular funding agency, because that can change and there's a lot of different details. If you're not sure about what grant to start with, this is a great place to go to get you oriented to your different resources. So we have Funding Institutional, we have Pivot, we have Info Ready, which is Drexel's internal portal. Sometimes when there's a competitive submission for federal applications, they'll only accept one grant project from Drexel. So then Drexel creates their own internal competition to select the best, what they think is the best application that then can be put forth to NEA, NIH, NSF. And so they use InfoReady to upload submissions. And then we have this one, Open Grants, which I haven't used. What I wanted to also just let you know, especially if you're a student and this is one of your first times considering applying for a grant and working with a PI, what we've done is last winter, I worked with a wonderful student in business, and we tried to go through and look at NSF in terms of all the different, I can see, let's see, they were removed, but we found, I think it was about 50 different education related grants under those different 7 programs that Arutus was talking about, the 7 different, sorry, not programs, the 7 different divisions. So we went and looked under each of those 7 divisions to identify education or learning science, learning professional development type grants. And it was up here. We'll just post it again. For some reason, it was removed. So this is one place where you can start. And I just wanted to let you know about it. And now I think we can hand it over. I'll stop my screen share. And then I'll let Tammy post her slide that she'd like to share with us.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Delafave, and I am the grant manager here at SOE. And I can attest that all the faculty that have been speaking are fantastic. I love working with them. This is my 3rd institution in my career, and by far, these are my favorite faculty. And I'm trying to share my screen. And as Tony said, when you have multiple screens, it becomes a little difficult. So hold on here. And so let's see. Bear with me. Okay, did that come up? It still did not. I'm sorry, I was hoping for technical difficulty where I would not have to speak, but okay, is my screen showing now?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you, Eric. Okay, so you come across a funding announcement, funding opportunity, a request for a proposal. You want to put in an application. So you're going to reach out to me. Here's my email. And one of the first things you need to do is send me that solicitation, because I'm going to go through it and pick it apart. So working with you, I'm going to say, highlight certain things in a solicitation. Due date. Is there a maximum for a budget? is there a maximum amount of PIs that can submit from a school? You know, what are the parts, you know, depending on the funding, the sponsor, different senior document formats are required. NIH up front, when an application is going in, you submit a bio sketch. NSF, which is the predominant sponsor for the School of Education, their bio sketch is in NSF format, very different than NIH. Also, on an NSF application, you're going to have your current and pending support, and you're going to have your affiliations document, collaborators and affiliations. Those documents are due up front on an NSF application. On an NIH, it is not. If you submit an NIH application, if NIH decides they're going to award you, you will have to do what's called a just-in-time. At that just-in-time, you are given a typical 2-week turnaround. And as I think Tony had said, you have to complete your IRB. You'll have to do your current and pending support. And because they want to see what your funding is at the time. And there's a few other documents that'll be required. NSF documents are different than NIH. So I'm going to go through and help assist you on which documents you need, the senior documents. One of the first things you will need to send me is a budget justification. Budget justification, you're going to, you know, state, you know, how long is it going to take you to do this work? 3 years. And that is in step back to the funding announcement, because the funding announcement will cap how many years you can put in. Typically it's 3 to 5. So we're going to go through the budget, through your budget justification. You're going to put how much effort, you know, you're going to put on there. You have a co-I, how much they're going to put on there. Are you going to have a subcontractor? Travel. A lot of the NSFs mandate that you go to the annual conference. Most sponsors expect you to go to a conference and present. Some will mandate that you bring your students. Students are a major part of the budget here, graduate students. Usually most of the applications I see have a minimum of 1. And they're usually on there a year. With a year, they go on 9 months. They're budgeted out for 9 months. Students here can only work during the academic year for 20 hours a week. So we will factor that into the budget. Students also work on your award in the summertime. They're not restricted to the 20 hours in the summertime. However, usually they're on there for about 20 hours a week. With a student being on an application, it is also part of our policy here at the School of Education that we budget $10,000 a year for tuition reimbursement. That is per student. So these are things to consider. Let's say, you know, the proposal has a max of, you know, $300,000. Within that $300,000 for each year, we have to break out the indirects. So that quickly salary fringes eat up your proposal really fast. So these are the things you're going to plan for. You're going to give me a rough budget justification. I'm going to do that budget either on a spreadsheet that I have, and I can certainly send it to you, that calculates fringes and overhead, or I do it in COIAS. COIUS is Drexel's internal database that we use for routing applications. What COIUS, so, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping around here. So as we're working on the application, let's say the application is with NSF. We're going to be simultaneously working in the NSF portal, which is research.gov, and in the COIUS. Your COIUS record, I'll be building the budgets. You'll need a budget justification for it, a narrative or statement of work, conflict of interest forms. And again, I'll guide you through what you need in that. In the meantime, also, we'll be working in NSF portal, and you'll be working on your documents, your project summary, putting that in there. And the COIUS record has to route and be fully approved before Drexel will give the final okay for your federal or foundation application to be submitted. The reason being is that application has to go through not only the school and any collaborative schools, everybody has to say, yep, okay, I agree with that application. And then finally, the sponsored programs office has to review that application to make sure it's in compliance with Drexel's policies. So as we're building the budget again, I'll walk you through it. The funding announcement, I'm going to highlight things that I think is important. You have a responsibility to read that funding announcement. Make sure you also know what your responsibilities are. Together, we really need to review everything to ensure that document is pristine. I cannot stress enough, as Tony had said, Chris had said, you have to plan out your application because time flies. And let's say we have a December 18th deadline. You get to December 18th so fast you can't believe it. You know, as you're working with your team, going over your applications, going over the parts of your application, time just flies. In order, we want the best opportunity for your application to be funded. So you're reading it, I'm reading it. I don't read your science, understand that. I'm responsible for the budgets, going over your documents. I'll upload documents with you to the sponsor portal. But we also want sponsored programs to give a full review to your application. We want them to look through every document to see that it's conforming. Each sponsor will have different requirements about, you know, how many pages a justification can be, how many pages a project summary can be, what you're allowed on your bio sketches for citations. They all differ. We want sponsor programs to review all of that, the formats, to make sure we're in compliance so your application is not rejected. And in order to do that, your application has to be completely finished, keyed, routed in COIUS and approved, and if it's NSF, finish in there 3 full business days before the deadline. If it's 2.5 business days before the deadline, they will not give a full review. They will only do a cursory review. A cursory review is they're going to look to make sure our EIN number is correct, our address is correct, and that's about it. So it behooves you to get that application done 3 full business days before. If, as Tony had said, you know, you need examples of stuff, let me know. I can reach out to other PIs, you know, and I can get documents with their approval. They'll work with you. You know, if I need to redact certain things just to give you examples, we'll do that. You know, I do the federal applications with you. For foundations, Megan's going to talk with you. She is actually the point of contact for foundation applications. My role with the foundation is the budget. Again, I'll build the budget with you with the budget justification, and I will route a COEUS record, build that. And advise you of anything else. Part of my role here is once you get awarded, I help manage that application. And that's probably in my history, that's more my strength is on the post-award. I've created a quarterly report. So once you're awarded, we're going to ensure you're following the terms and conditions of that sponsor. You know, you've put in, when you're developing your budget, your effort is based on RBOs, research buyouts, or they're also called research course buyouts, and summer, if you're a 9-month summer effort, summer salary. It can be a combination of both. Sometimes, you know, awards are just summer effort with students working throughout the year. On the post-award, we need to make sure we follow effort, because if you, let's say you have a key, all your key, if you have a change in key of personnel, anything more than 25% prior to the change of effort, we need to notify the sponsor. In my career, it always behooves you, if you're unsure, I'll go to that sponsor, or you go to the sponsor and say, hey, this is what we want to do. You know, do we have your approval? You know, on the post-award side, my job is to protect against audit and any red flags. So we need to follow, you know, again, the terms and conditions. And an example is you decide, you know what, I need equipment. Well, you never said you needed an equipment when you originally sent in your application. We just can't do that. We need to go to the sponsor, you know, or you may want to change, you know, your participants, how many you had. I need to read that, read the guidelines, make sure we're able to do that without prior approval. You know, anything like that, you'd be surprised how things change. And the federal government is constantly changing what they do. So if we need to rebudget, I need to review the terms and conditions. And if I'm unsure, I'm going to go to that sponsor and ask them. But you know, to keep you abreast of the health of your grant, I will send you a quarterly report. Sometimes I'm a little late on that, depending on my workload, but I'll give you a summary of where you are, you know, how your grant is running. You can see that. And if you have any questions, you want to meet with me, you know, just let me know. When you're awarded, you have the responsibility of a progress report. You have to do annually. It's very important you do those timely, because we will get, the school itself will get a communication that you haven't completed your progress report. Also, a responsibility of yourself is effort reporting. You will have quarterly reporting to, and you know, report that, hey, this effort is being dedicated to that grant. You know, if it's not, you shouldn't be certifying an effort report. When your grant is established, I will work with the school to get that fund set up. With that, if you have any advisory board members, you have any subcontractors, we need to do the paperwork before they start working. So, you know, that requires independent contractor forms to be filled out by yourself as the lead PI, and also by the contractor. We have to have the tax office review it. It's a time-consuming process, and I advise before you start anybody working that's non-Drexel, we start this process 2 months ahead of time. Drexel's a little slow in moving paperwork. But, you know, I have the responsibility of getting people hired for you, doing the paperwork, you know, so everybody is charging the grant correctly. So, key points. Make sure you send me the funding announcement right away. That'll start our communication chain. You know, get your budget justification to me so I can build the budget. Never hesitate to call me. Sometimes, you know, the PIs are tied up with teaching during the day. If we need to work at night, I have no problem doing that. I've worked with many a PI at night. I understand, you know, this is your research, this is your life. I have no problem meeting and accommodating your schedules. Any questions?
That was great. So much. Thank you so much. I was chatting and emailing and at the same time, so apologize. So if anyone, I just want to remind people that this is recording. We've had a bunch of problems with Zoom, and I know there are a bunch of students that were waiting to get on Zoom. So we apologize, and hopefully we'll avoid that mistake in the future. But please take down Tammy's email. And she's very gracious with her time, as she was implying, in terms of being very flexible. And then we'll have to hold your questions for emailing or for another time, because we're going to move on to another guest speaker. So I want to transition.
Quick comment.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment and say that I've worked so closely with Tammy, and she's an amazing partner when you're working on a grant. So I thank you so much, and thank you for today's presentation.
Thank you, Sheila. It's very kind.
Yeah, kudos.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm now going to introduce Damien Rohrbacher with Elsevier. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today, because you're just going to give us a better understanding, I think, of using this new tool that we really haven't had like widespread kind of access and use. So you're going to talk about funding institutional, and take it away.
Thank you very much. Let me just get the information on the screen here. Okay. Well, good afternoon. My name is Damien Rohrbacher, and I'm a solutions manager on the Elsevier Research Intelligence team, focused on the East Coast primarily. I am a local. I am a resident of South Jersey and worked for many years at the firm that previously was located at 3501 Market Street, which now, of course, is part of the Drexel campus. I do work in a coordinated effort with Charity, your customer consultant and absolute wizard of everything. So I've got some big shoes to fill today with her absence, and I can clearly and confidently state I'm going to fall short, but I'm going to give it my best. For those that have been in contact with Charity in the past, you understand exactly what my viewpoint is about her full scope of knowledge and know-how. But there might be some on the call who have not been in contact with Charity. I would implore you to do not hesitate and ping either myself or her with questions. We work as a team, and together we are the Drexel Research Intelligence Unit at Elsevier. So there's lots on the slides today, and I promise there are not too many slides and not too much information, but this is meant to be leveraged as a future resource for you guys. So very often during sessions like these, the recollection half-life could be a mere matter of days, perhaps even hours, given the fact that we're talking on a Friday afternoon after lunch. These slides will certainly assist in refreshing your recollection. My part of this equation today is to hopefully provide you with information worthy remaining front of mind. Should I fall short of providing information that's memorable, I can at the very least keep things targeted and brief. So today we're going to approach three primary areas: understanding funding challenges, the funding institutional solutions, and then bringing it all together with funding institutional use cases. We begin with understanding today's funding challenges. Recently, an institution performing grant analysis advised me they dug deeper into why some faculty are receiving funding and others don't. At times, seniority or industry impact seem to not play any role in the equation, but they did identify 3 reoccurring themes. Where should we look? How much time does it really take to find relevant opportunities? And how can I track these things? So with that researcher information, they've reported that the amount of time spent applying for funding leaves fewer hours to complete other research activities that they want to be doing. This was actually a topic recently discussed at the Times Higher Education World Summit earlier this week that I attended. The view that seemed to be universally shared at the summit was that research should serve as a stabilizing force for the university, while teaching was described as bringing living color to the campus. However, it often takes weeks or months to find the funding opportunities, write the proper proposals, keep track of the application outcomes, only to begin the process all over again. And the competition is intense and only getting worse for funding. Researchers are in turn spending even more time applying for grants. We also recognize that researchers are trying to accomplish more and more on a daily basis, including perhaps even teach a few classes in between. So with that, let's talk about funding institutional solutions. This researcher feedback is what led Elsevier to develop a comprehensive yet intuitive solution known as funding institutional. If you have ever shopped at Amazon, congratulations, you are halfway there to using this tool. You know how to search, you know how to refine through the category listing that's usually on the left-hand side. You know how to add items of interest to your cart, and maybe even you tag things to track for future reference. All of those things are shared with the funding institutional setup. So funding institutional supports researchers, pardon me, funding workflow as you discover, apply to, and are awarded the grants. In addition to providing funding landscape intelligence that identifies winnable opportunities, and let's emphasize that and underline it, identifies winnable opportunities. The platform offers a holistic view of national as well as international funders to show researchers more funding options. So on the left-hand side here of this slide, you're going to see the platform aggregates more than 24,000 funding opportunities currently from over 5,000 funders, as well as data on over 6 million awards. So the platform provides smart recommendations utilizing a fingerprint engine. And that engine matches users with relevant funding opportunities, as well as, of course, in-depth insights into funders and grants that are awarded. So it's worth pausing and just actually calling out these items on the right-hand side of the screen once again. Simple and highly intuitive user experience, smart recommendations on the most relevant funding opportunities, in-depth insights into funders in the previously awarded grants, integration with leading research information management systems, and then ultimately time savings. You're going to hear that reoccurring theme over and over. This product is about saving time. So what is the Fingerprint Engine? It mines document text using advanced semantic technology and field of research specific vocabularies. That's a mouthful. Funding Institutional connects with Fingerprint Engine to recommend funding opportunities to researchers based on precise search terms. So moving along the bottom of the screen, the text, we mine the text. Leveraging AI, we identify the concepts. We create the document fingerprint, and then ultimately what you wind up with is a fingerprint index. And for example, in this particular example, we wind up with words like cell, mice, or neoplasms. The green circles there take into account weighting. So cells, just about everything out there is referencing cells. but only about half of them are referencing metabolism. So let's segue now to the common use cases by researchers to bring this all together for you. Smart technology built into the platform will auto-complete searches and automatically tracks active and reoccurring opportunities based on the keywords. The program allows users to save searches, receive award alerts, and stay up to date on funding opportunities available internally as well. So users can add notes to funding opportunities and funder profiles as well to speed up future applications. Again, everything points to saving you time. Researchers are able to perform a quick search on the home screen or an advanced search under the Opportunities tab. So what you see at the top of the screen here is the home search opportunity component. You'll see you have the opportunity to search for opportunities, awarded grants, and funders. If you were to select opportunities, you could then perform an advanced search. Of course, you have the ability to add filters once something does populate. Even if I were to select, let's say, the next tab over the awarded grants, I could then fine tune by saying things like, well, I want to know only internal, or I want to know limited or reoccurring opportunities. I might also begin with a quick view of Drexel awards. And then I could hone in on my specific area of research and say, okay, this is where we've been. This is what's been awarded. Maybe this is a logical starting point. It is possible to save a search so that your search can immediately be replicated upon your next visit. So my recommendation here is take the time, think it through, get it right, and then it's easy to replicate or automate. Tracking funding opportunities in your account allows you to easily find and monitor them for changes or approaching deadlines. So once you track an opportunity, the opportunity is marked with a blue star. And then that star will appear in every page of Funding Institutional. Additionally, you do have the option of setting alerts if you want to actually be notified of new opportunities by email when the metadata of or perhaps when metadata of a tracked opportunity is changed. So what you see here is a search for artificial intelligence. 47 funding opportunities have populated. You'll see under that, you have the ability to save the search, so you don't have to recreate it next time through. Then you have the blue star tracking or the sharing opportunity. Below, you see the two results. Artificial intelligence has been highlighted as the match for our search. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see right now everything is sorted by relevance and the corresponding dollar, but there are an assortment of ways to change your sorting style. So we can help researchers by suggesting funding as well. And you can enter yourself as a researcher. And this is in the suggestions piece that you see here on the top right-hand side in the orange circle. Funding Institutional can also provide a new opportunity recommendations, as you witnessed on the left-hand side of the screen. This again significantly reduces the amount of time you as the researcher spend looking for relevant funding opportunities during an average week. This solution is about increasing your efficiencies. So we do have the ability to easily manage and apply for funding, leveraging Funding Institutional. So once researchers find the relevant funding opportunities, Funding Institutional assists in accelerating the research project timelines. In addition to receiving funding opportunity recommendations based on previous searches, researchers can also access in-depth award analytics and funder profile information to help improve the grant application outcome. Funding Institutional also leverages Scopus data to enhance award or research team recommendations. And on this slide, I am also going to reinforce the points here. You're able to find opportunities based on previous searches. So again, spend the time up front, easy to replicate. Access detailed award analytics to improve your grant application outcome. You can visit the funders' profiles and discover what their mission might be, or missions might be. You can review the research team or a single researcher, the recommendations based on the Scopus profiles themselves. You can move funding opportunities into research project workflows, leveraging API capabilities. And then ultimately, you have the ability to share funding opportunities within institutions via Pure, or easily apply for grants directly through Pure. For a quick overview of all funding institutional features and where to find them, please visit our funding institutional quick start guide. It is a quick start guide, I promise. Have no fear. It's only 6 pages, which includes the cover page. So there's no need to digest an encyclopedia worth of information. It's simple. It probably has detailed pictures, screenshots that will mimic exactly where you are in the system and where you've come to any sort of a roadblock. And with that, I want to thank everyone for their time. I do hope I left you with some information which will certainly assist your efforts and remain front of mind. My mobile and email address are here. Obviously, you guys also, are a good number of you, have charities information. Please don't hesitate to ask any questions of us at any time.
Thank you so much, Damian. I love the Philadelphia, South Jersey connection too. I really appreciate it. This is a really wonderful tool. And so I think that a lot of us just do the hunt and peck on individual websites, but this really consolidates information and can be really valuable. So we appreciate your time. I know that you have to peel off for another commitment. So we'll be in touch if we have any questions and follow up. And now we're going to transition to the Office of Foundations and working with our liaison, Megan Loeb, and she helps our School of Education faculty apply for and seek out different foundation opportunities that might be relevant to research. However, there are some things that are possible for doctoral students to apply for in terms of, like, there's the Spencer Foundation doctoral fellowship that we always encourage people to try. And then in addition, I would just note before I hand it over to Megan that if there's an opportunity that fits your research and or the research of your research assistant supervisor or your supervising professor, then they can be the lead applicant and you can possibly assist in that. So there's different ways to accommodate for different roles on grant applications if you're a student. So let me turn it over to Megan, and thank you so much for joining us, Megan.
Of course. Happy Friday, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm gonna share my screen, and I only have a couple of slides, which will hopefully, okay, perfect. Give some time for Tammy and I to answer any questions that you might have. And so as Jen said, I'm Associate Director of Foundation Relations. So I work in the Office of Institutional Advancement in the corporate Foundation and Corporate Relations team. And it's about, there's about 6 of us, and we work with all the schools and centers across the university. So I support School of Ed, Westfall, University Community Partnerships, and the Environmental Collaboratory. But I love working with School of Ed and just all the amazing work that you do. And so I'm just going to give a little bit of background on our office, and with that, just kind of identify the ways that I can be of help. And I will also say this at the beginning and after as well, if anyone is interested in more of the how to write a proposal details, I have a whole slide deck that I can provide on that as well. But I know we've touched on it today, whether it's talking about NSF grants, and a lot of it is the same. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on that. But just very generally, so Foundation and Corporate Relations, FCR, we build partnerships with private and corporate foundations to just grow and sustain Drexel's teaching, research, health, and civic engagement initiatives. So we work with countless foundations and corporations of all varying sizes and all varying grant amounts to just really build those and develop those relationships. We support projects ranging in size, duration, impact, anything $1 million large research grants. So, as Jen mentioned, some of the Spencer Foundation, which has large grants, William T. Grant, some of those big ones, to smaller, more local, like William Penn Foundation. And supporting a range of projects. So from testing new pilots and initiatives, new technologies, social science research, and then more of our community-based initiatives as well. And yeah, so some of the activities, so basically how I operate is I love to meet with faculty members and happy to meet with students as well, one-on-one, to just hear more about your research interests, your current work and activities, and then as well, just get a feel for how much funding you think would be good to sustain your work, and then your timeline for when you want to launch your project. And so then with that background information, I use Pivot, I use Funding Institutional, I use the Foundation Directory, and really start setting up searches so that I can always keep apprised of certain opportunities that might be relevant to your work. And then with that, I'm sure some of the faculty on here have gotten emails from me that just flag a grant opportunity in the subject line and just present an opportunity that I think, based off this conversation, is a good fit and really aligns with their work and something that we could work on together. And through that process as well, it's really about spending the time and having the capacity too on our end to cultivate relationships with newer returning funders. And so that's anything from some of those initial questions as you're developing your proposal to, hey, is this actually a fit? Can we have a conversation about our work? And doing some of that initial outreach to help, in a sense, ensure that we move along in the proposal process, and then also talk about later on the back end, supporting some of that cultivation to help us get those returning funders. And then, I support all parts of the submission process. So reviewing, revising, editing proposals. I help with drafting. I think, Sheila mentioned at the very beginning, this idea of having a colleague available to take a look and review your narrative and your work. And so I can provide that outside perspective as someone who doesn't have the education background, but has plenty of experience writing grants for all sorts of interest areas and all sorts of organizations as well. So working with various Drexel offices to collect all of the supporting documentation you might need. So anything financial related to the university, our 501c3 determination letter, whatever it is that is required in order to submit. And then, providing that helpful hand to just coordinating, making sure we have all the pieces, everything is going to be on time, and we're going to meet the deadline. And then again, just circling back through, I think one of the areas in which I'm most valuable as well is reading the proposal and reading everything through the funder's eyes. And so I will take a very close look at the RFP and at what the funder, what their funding priorities are, and make sure that our proposal aligns with what it is that they are looking to fund. And then as well, again, I already kind of touched on this, but really I can be available for that relationship building. I know that takes a lot of time, capacity. It takes multiple outreach, multiple points of contact and multiple touch points in order to sometimes actually get a hold of a foundation program officer, as they can be really busy. And so I can provide any of sort of that support work to make sure that we are front of their mind when we go through and submit and they are reviewing our proposals. One of the things that I've been working with Jen on too is trying to get some of the larger private foundations, so Walton Family Foundation as an example, to come visit and speak with all School of Ed faculty members so that faculty members are aware of who these larger private foundations are, what opportunities they have available, and can allow for initiating conversation and having those engagements. Yeah, and I'm point of contact. And then also to, as again, I really support the once the award is submitted, my work does not stop there. And so making sure that reports are being completed in a timely manner, making sure that any sort of documentation that is needed for the reports we have, and then working just on setting up reminders so that we have all those touch points along the way, so that, you know, it doesn't just stop when the grant is awarded. There's a lot more cultivation, a lot more engagement that needs to be done while the work is going on as well. And then I think my last two slides are just diagrams that I apologize are going to be a little hard to read, but I think do just a really good job of this one illustrating the grant writing process. And so and all things that I have touched on. So the first part is, you know, the needs and focus. And so this is where we meet. I get a sense of your research interest, the work you want to do, finding prospective grants. So this is where I'm using Funding Institutional, Pivot, Foundation Directory, setting up searches, looking for opportunities, developing the general proposal and budget. And this is where Tammy and I work together. Submitting, usually, especially for School of Ed, private foundation opportunities, it does start with a letter of inquiry process, and that's a short 2-pager to just give the funder an idea of your work, and then see if, on the funder's end, if they invite you to submit a full proposal, if they want to hear more about your work and potentially fund it. Again, preparing the specific proposal, same sort of process as the letter of inquiry with the general proposal and the budget. Now at the very bottom, so submitting the proposal before the deadline, that is always a fingers crossed we're going to do it situation. And, you know, like Tammy said, I do work day and night to make sure that we submit on time. And then we just go into the review process. And so this can be anything from 6 weeks to 6 months. It unfortunately just depends on foundation, depends on how many they receive and their review process. Some of the bigger foundations do have review panels, and so that just takes longer. And then, of course, we always win. So receiving that award letter. And then after that, we must accept because we've already got this far. And then after that, it's really just carrying out the project, doing the work, and making sure, again, those reports are submitted and those touch points are made so that we can go back through into this loop and start all over again with resubmitting when the grant period is over. And then, yeah, this last diagram. So again, if anyone is interested, please reach out to me. My contact's going to be on the last slide. I have a whole slide deck that goes into parts of the proposal that I'm happy to share separately and chat with you about it separately. But I think for today, I'll just keep it to this broad overview. And so then really within a proposal, we have the introduction, that executive summary, what is this going to be and what is its relevance? Organization, program, mission, and history. So who are we? Explanation of the need, problem, why is this important? Why are we undertaking this work? What is the project? So describing it, the goals and objectives, what it is we seek to do, target audience and demographics, who are we reaching? And then all the way bottom, now we're at the yellow. This is an important one to highlight, especially for private foundations, just outcome and evaluation. Private foundations are caring more and more about metrics and evaluation, just to make sure that the work is having meaning, the work is impactful, the work resonates with the foundation's mission and is not just a one-time thing that everyone forgets about the next day. So private foundations are really focusing in on this, and it's an important one to highlight. Again, timeline, sometimes that is dictated by the foundation and just how long the funding opportunity is, but I have not seen one that is any shorter than 12 months, I don't believe. So usually like 12 to 24 months. Key project staff and collaborations for private foundations. This can be internal. Some of them do like you to have nonprofit partners with school districts, partners with other universities. So it can be expansive as well, just like with NSF grants. Sustainability, again, the idea of it having lasting impact and really making a difference. The budget, which again is where Tammy comes in. And then your compelling closing statement. How are you summing this all up? How are you putting in that final request and that final final case for why you should be funded? And that is it. So again, here is my contact information. I'm Associate Director of Foundation Relations in Institutional Advancement. Don't hesitate to email me and we'll set up a time to talk where I can hear all about your work and support you through the application process. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you, everyone.
That was wonderful. I really appreciate all the specific stages that were outlined. And I think that's really imperative to get a sense of, it has a whole special cycle. And just like when students, because we have a lot of students in our audience, are tackling like a thesis or a dissertation, there's all those expectations of like, yeah, you have all these things that you're required to hit. And then once you hit those things, then you have flexibility. So it's great to know how specific grant proposals are. They're they have very specific requirements that are unique to the foundation and the prospective funder. So I really appreciate that. We have a couple minutes and then we're going to close out the mini workshop portion of our event. And we're going to let Megan have her one-on-one meetings with the faculty who had previously signed up for those slots. So within this kind of 5-minute time frame, Sheila, is there anything that you wanted to touch upon related to foundation applications, or should we open it up to questions?
I want to thank Megan, and I also want to thank Eric O'Brien for tech support, without which some of this would not be possible. So thank you so much. And I think I'm going to be off because I'm not on one of those one-on-one meetings, although I will be getting in touch with Megan if I think of a proposal. Thus far, I've submitted only NSF proposals and have been awarded several. But if I think of a proposal that I can, now having heard you, Megan, I'm thinking of maybe I should look into foundations as well,
Absolutely.
For a different program. So thank you so much for that. And I will be in touch with you when I have an idea, but I don't want to take your time today when I don't have an idea for a foundation.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Okay. Well, thanks, Sheila. Does anyone else have a question for Megan? Maybe Megan, do you have a slide that has your email on it?
Yeah, let me reshare my screen.
Okay, perfect.
Let's see. Yep, there it is. And email is the best way to get a hold of me. And I said, and then just email me. We can set up, I usually set up like a 45-minute appointment to start, either in person or virtual, really your preference. Yeah, to just chat about your work.
Okay, great. And then I will make one last reminder pitch about the, there's an ARA Doctoral Minority Fellowship that's open, because I see there's some PhD and EDD students on there. So please talk to your supervising professor if you would like to consider applying. It's specifically for people of ethnic and racial minority backgrounds. And thanks. So, and other than that, I'm going to let you have a couple minutes to segue into your first one-on-one meeting. Do you know who that is, Megan?